Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guests today are Bryan Martin and Elizabeth Williams. Bryan and Elizabeth work at Big City Mountaineers, a Colorado-based nonprofit that transforms the lives of underserved youth through wilderness mentoring expeditions. Through partnerships with community youth programs around the United States, Big City Mountaineers exposes close to 1,000 youth per year to outdoor adventures in some of our country's most spectacular public lands. Not only do these young people learn outdoor skills, but more importantly, they learn critical life skills while also improving their self-confidence, communication skills, and leadership abilities. Prior to assuming his role as executive director at BCM, Bryan enjoyed great success with a wide variety of conservation and outdoor-related organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, Continental Divide Trail Alliance, Colorado Mountain Club, and the Land Trust Alliance. Elizabeth was a teacher in India and Nepal before joining BCM as a marketing intern. 10 years and a lot of hard work later, she's risen through the ranks and is now the director of programs. Both Bryan and Elizabeth share a deep enthusiasm for the outdoors and a belief that outdoor experiences can be transformative. Their passion for the work and for BCM's mission is palpable, so I know you'll enjoy getting to know them. I met Bryan and Elizabeth at the BCM offices in the American Mountaineering Center in Golden, Colorado, and we had a very fun and in-depth conversation. We discussed BCM's mission, the details of their wilderness expeditions, and why outdoor adventures can be such life-changing experiences. We discussed Bryan and Elizabeth's professional backgrounds and learned what drew them to careers centered around the outdoors and service. We also hear one of the many success stories in which a student overcomes her initial fears to thrive on a week-long wilderness trip. Thanks to Bryan and Elizabeth for taking the time to chat. Hope you enjoy this episode. When you meet somebody for the first time, never met them, and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer that question? And Bryan, you can go first.
What we do is we provide free, fully outfitted, and professionally guided wilderness mentoring, backpacking, and paddling trips for under-resourced youth in cities across the country. We partner with youth agencies to identify those kids, and we work with them to tailor and create a curriculum in the backcountry that can provide a real meaningful experience for kids that lack that opportunity right now.
Got it. And so you are the executive director, and Elizabeth, you're the program manager. Can you guys describe just a little bit about kind of what your day-to-day jobs are and kind of what, when you come to work, what is the goal?
Sure. I'll turn it to Elizabeth to answer first.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the program director, so I actually oversee all of our program managers across the country. So my day-to-day, or what I kind of jokingly say, is I spend the money that Bryan raises. Yes. So my job is really overseeing anything that has to do with our students, our volunteers, our risk and safety. A lot of logistics go into that. And then as my role is developed, sometimes a little bit of fundraising and working on our annual report right now. A little bit of everything, but the core of what I'm doing really involves our kids and our volunteers.
Great. And
yeah,
Bryan?
That's true. I mean, because of the history that Elizabeth has here with BCM, we've been able to, count on her for, helping with so many different aspects of the organization because of the track record of success she's had here and the, institutional knowledge that she brings day in and day out to the organization. In terms of my role, I've been executive director for 2 years now. It's a pretty traditional ED role. My job is to certainly, be the primary fundraiser for the organization, but also organize and work with both the staff and the board to set a direction for BCM that helps us not only accomplish our mission year in and year out, but also, sets us on a trajectory for increased success on into the future.
Got it. So I've always been really interested in how you can build teamwork, you can build camaraderie, you can build confidence through outdoor experiences. mean, that's been a big part of my life, my whole life. And so can you talk a little bit about that and how this specifically applies to some of the youth that you serve? And then kind of a second part of that question is, why do you guys think that these outdoor experiences are so powerful, say, compared to team sports or something that you can get in the city?
Mm-hmm. So a few, specific ways that we, work with youth agencies to, provide these catalyst experiences in the outdoors are through one, like I said before, connecting with the youth agency coordinators or managers to identify a specific cohort of kids that would benefit from an experience like this. We will then kind of sit down and work with that manager or that counselor to craft a curriculum that would work for them in the field. Mm-hmm. One example that we use a lot is our partnership with the I Have a Dream Foundation here in Colorado. They're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide scholarships to kids who will be the first in their family to go to college.
Oh, wow.
And so we have a now multi-year relationship with them where we've brought multiple cohorts of both boys and girls through our program every summer. And we kind of loosely use the metaphor of climbing the mountain to college when we think about the curriculum that will roll out in the field with those kids. And so we work on goal setting and perseverance and overcoming obstacles that they might be facing, both in the field and applying that to what it's going to take to overcome some of those obstacles and accomplish some of those goals, specifically the larger goal of getting into a college or university once they return home from that outdoor experience.
Sure.
So we kind of tweak and tailor each trip depending on the cohort of kids that we're working with, and use the agency's input and advice and how to execute that in the field.
Can you give an example of an agency, like a specific agency, and maybe walk us through a trip and how that works from the time the agency contacts you till the time you go on the trip? How long is the trip? How many kids are in these groups? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so we have a couple different kinds of programs. And so here in Colorado, we run overnight camps for 8 to 12-year-olds. Mm-hmm. So with the example Bryan was talking about, we work with the I Have a Dream Foundation, and they year over year can bring their 9-year-olds who are then 10, who are then 11, who are then 12, and go to this overnight camp, where our goals, it's definitely a little bit more like a traditional summer camp of nature walks and team building games and cooking over a Coleman stove for the first time.
Sure.
And then some of those kids then get to graduate into our week-long programs, and that's really the core of what we're doing across the country. Our week-long expeditions for 13 to 18-year-olds. And on those expeditions, it's 5 students and 5 adults. So there are very few programs out there with that 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, of those 5 adults, one's a paid instructor who's overseeing the safety and risk management, the curriculum delivery. One of the adults works with the students year-round, so as a staff at the agency partner, and then 3 volunteers who are coming from all different backgrounds. Avid outdoor enthusiasts who want to share their love of the outdoors, people who maybe have a ton of youth development experience but have never been on a multi-day backpacking trip and are going to learn right alongside our students. So 3 volunteers, that makes up our adult team, and then 5 students from that partner agency.
And I know you operate out of a lot more spots than just Colorado. Where are the main hubs?
Yeah, we're headquartered here in Colorado, but run programs out of San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis. We just opened up in Boston last year, and then have a small legacy program out of Miami. But we're bringing those Miami kids to one of our backpacking locations out west.
And so you've been here 10 years. And so just in your time, have you seen the organization or the areas that you operate in grow?
We've really focused on growing within the areas. So we haven't added a region since I've been here, but have been running more expeditions in those regions. And as we're moving into our future, really looking to build all of those to reach kind of full capacity before we look into expanding to other cities, just so we have really sustainable funding for those places and are really using all our resources well.
So when these kids show up, what percentage of them have any outdoor experience at all? I mean, I'm not talking about camping. I'm talking about just any, like going hiking.
Yeah, very few. For our students, you ask kind of what the full program model is. On our expeditions, we do a family meeting first, and so we actually go to the students, bring full backpacks with everything they're going to be used, and just talk about the experience they're signing up for. And then we do a single day kind of training program. So for our backpacking trips, it's just a day hike. For our canoeing programs, it's a day just paddling out on a local lake. And for a lot of those students, it's their first time on a trail when they're out on that single day kind of training program with us. And I don't have final percentages, but the vast majority of our kids have not slept outside before they head out for their week-long trip.
So how does that go? I mean, how does that go for the first time?
I think it's really terrifying for some of our students. It's really exciting for other students. We really try to transition them into the backcountry, and so like I said, we do that day hike first, so they've had at least the experience of being up in the mountains, and then the first night is sleeping either at a base camp or car camping. And so we're not hitting the trail and then throwing them out into the woods, but instead they're staying there with the van. There's usually a porta potty or an outhouse, so that first night is a car camping experience, and then moving into the backcountry experience. So I think that helps a little.
Definitely.
But it's a huge shock. We have an old tagline that says the only way to change a youth's perspective is to give them an entirely new one. So back to that question of like, how is this different from team sports? And I think that's it. We're moving them so far out of everything they understand that then like they're just kind of open to learning new things. And then we're giving them all sorts of leadership experience and really letting them own their experience. And I think that's where the transformational power of the backcountry really comes to play.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think in a perfect world, we're able to transition the kids from a first half of a week-long expedition where they're really learning and following the instructors and the mentors to one where they're really owning the trip. They're, setting the menu, they're doing the navigation, they're planning the breaks and the direction with which, we're traveling. And so they really become, owners of the expedition by the end of that week-long experience. The other thing that I would probably say I'd be remiss in not mentioning too is that goes along with helping our kids adjust to a backcountry setting is all the gear and equipment that we are able to provide for them on every trip. We outfit our kids from head to toe, so you can imagine they kind of come into our office with just their weekend clothes on, their gym clothes on, and they walk out of our office and into our vans with everything they need to have a safe, fun, dry, engaging time out there. So, the Timberland boots, the Columbia rain jackets, the Thermarest mattress pads, the Kelty tents, the Osprey backpacks, all the things that will help them enjoy themselves out there, feel safe, feel comfortable, and have a good time.
Well, I would imagine that's a huge barrier. You're removing a huge barrier by having that because, one, the expense, obviously, but two, it's just intimidating nowadays more than any to go into an REI and try to figure out all this gear. And it's hard for me, and I do this stuff all the time. And so being able to take that out and say, look, we got that covered. Just show up, and we'll keep you safe and comfortable.
Right.
So I've done a semester in Knowles during college, which was one of the most formative experiences of my life. My wife has done 3 or 4 hour bound courses, and I think in general people talk about Knowles is kind of focused on skills and Outward Bound is focused on personal development. And in the end, I think you end up getting the skills and the personal development from both. But that's just what I've heard, is that those are kind of the focuses. Do you guys have a focus on one over the other? You do?
Yeah, I'll let Elizabeth speak to that.
Yeah, we're definitely more into that, personal development, critical life skills. So our mission is to instill critical life skills using the outdoors. And so, to that, like Knowles Outward Bound, one way Knowles will do meal groups where it's only 4 people. So everybody really gets a chance to use a stove and cook for themselves, we're Outward Bound, and then also our model is group cooking. So, somebody's cooking for all 10 people, everybody's sitting down as a group, as a family to eat. And so definitely more on the relational side, but our students are still picking up some of those outdoor skills of how to set up a tent. Every student has an opportunity to be the cook, so they're using the stove, how to travel as a group, how to use a map and compass. We use what we call leadership roles every day. So over the course of the week, every student gets a chance to be the navigator, so they're kind of the leader of the day. The sweep, so they're in charge of making sure everybody stays together. They have some other responsibilities. The water master, so making sure the group's staying hydrated. The cook, and then the educator. And so they rotate through those roles throughout the course of the week and then get to learn, all the little ins and outs that go with them as they're in each role.
Got it. So when these kids, they go through, they have this great experience. I know from my own experience that just what a huge amount of growth can take place in even just a week. And so do you have any systems in place for when they get home to ensure that these lessons stick? Because I would imagine that's kind of the trick.
Yeah, so that's why we really rely on our youth agency partnership model. Okay. So these students are with a program year-round, and a staff person who works with them year-round is experiencing this experience right along with them. So when they go home, that adult, that agency staff is able to say, 6 months later, like, oh, you're having a really hard time in your math class. What were the skills we learned on our backpacking trip? How do we apply those to now? So really relying on those agency partnerships for that. And then are currently, with our new strategic plan, developing some alumni programming and ways to re-engage students, especially those ones. It's funny because I see hundreds of kids come through our office, and some of them I'll talk to, and they're like, I'm so glad I went. I'm never going again. 6 months later, totally different story, but that day. And then you have kids that come back, and you can see there's a spark. Like, they know that this is a thing that they really loved. And so how are we capturing those students is really a big thing that we're moving into the future of giving them opportunities.
And so how do you guys measure success? I mean, I love Bill Gates, and I love what he's done in the philanthropy world. And he always talks about measurement. Mm-hmm. And I know Bill Gates doesn't have the answer to everything. And my wife's in the nonprofit world, and she reminds me of that. But I think that's an interesting way to look at it, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So what are the measurements?
So we look at a few things. Kind of first and foremost, we kind of tier all of our measurement, all of our success to a survey called the 40 Developmental Assets.
Okay.
This is a set of assets or attributes that we have internally to us or that surround us externally as support that, basically study after study shows that the more of these assets you have and the stronger you are in those assets, the more likely you'll be successful later in life. So we have plugged in our program into this longitudinal analysis that's conducted by the Search Institute, which is the nonprofit that's really looking at 40 developmental asset data, obviously not just from big city mountaineers, but from youth development agencies all over, the country, and have been doing that now for over 20 plus years. And again, the idea is to look at these assets, both internal and external, and kind of watch these youth grow in the strength of those assets as well as adding assets to their life over the long term. And again, the more that they have in those, the more likely they'll be able to succeed later in life.
Like, what's an example of a few of those assets? Like, just some of the ones that are important off the top of your head. I mean, obviously they all are, but
self-confidence, self-efficacy, resilience. Those are some of the ones that are, kind of internal assets, but then external, it's, having a strong peer network and supportive role models, and so those are just a couple of examples of, how we're kind of measuring, what our youth are able to attain, both through expedition, but then in that kind of transference back to the youth agency afterward. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we we provide them with a survey, pre-expedition and post-expedition, and are able to kind of see, how we're able to move the needle in those asset categories before expedition and once they come back home.
Got it. So when you're measuring it like that, I imagine you're doing it so that you can make changes. Do you have any make changes as needed? Are there any examples, say in the last 10 years or so, of something new that you've enacted into these expeditions that has been successful?
Yeah, so we actually, the 40 developmental assets is very much a personal growth tool. And so fortunately for us, because of our program model, we've always seen success through that. We also then are surveying on kind of program quality on a separate survey that we do with students.
Got it.
And that one we've definitely utilized for programmatic changes of, one of the questions is, I felt like emotionally supported. And one year we saw kind of lower numbers. And so really looked at our training as how to, help our mentors be more supportive to our students. And then as well as just, retention statistics of how likely are you to recommend this experience to a friend, both for our students and for our adults. And then a lot of feedback that we'll also get on our instructors to make sure that they're quality people that we should rehire every year. Come more from our volunteers than our students, but we've got a lot of paperwork at the end of every course for our kids. So 40 developmental assets, post-expedition program surveys, and then a lot of qualitative feedback that we get from students too. Really good quotes about, what they learned from a mentor or why the outdoors is important to them that we're then able to use both kind of in our external talking about what we're doing, but then for feedback for our programs and our course areas and that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of debriefs after expeditions are over with our volunteer mentors, with our trip instructors, with our youth agency partners as well. And, that kind of mixes with the 40 developmental assets and some of the youth feedback forms that we receive to, increase and improve our programming year in and year out.
Got it.
I would also, just say that I think another thing that I look for as it regards the success of our program or a measurement of the impact that we're having or the importance that we're having in the space is how many youth agencies return to us year in and year out. And in that regard, we're doing very, very well. And so we see ourselves as really a service provider to these youth development agencies who could not, put on a trip like this on their own. And so to the extent that we're seeing them coming back time and time again, tells us that they're valuing the service that we're providing to them.
That's great. So when you're thinking about the instructors or mentors on the trips, I would imagine just because you're really good at the outdoors you have really high-end outdoor skills does not necessarily mean you're a great teacher or a great mentor. They're just kind of two separate skill sets. So how do you go about finding that perfect overlap between the sweet spot between the outdoor skills and being a good teacher?
Yeah. I think the thing I love about our model is because, especially on the volunteer side, we are hiring, for lack of a better word, 3 volunteers. And so we're able to actually even mix skill sets. So sometimes we do get a volunteer who is much higher on the technical skills and maybe not quite as good as at the youth facilitation skills, that kind of thing. We really work to pair them then with somebody who's very good at the facilitation skills, and then they can learn from each other and balance one another out. And then of course our best mentors, the ones that we beg to come back every year, really do have that good mix of loving to be in the outdoors but then being able to translate those experiences to our youth.
I would guess that a lot of these experiences are equally transformative for the volunteers and the instructors.
I think sometimes even more so than for our kids. We get so many volunteers coming back and just saying, I had no idea that I was going to learn so much and change so much. And we have a huge volunteer retention rate as well. I think last year 45% of our volunteers came back, but we also increased our program numbers significantly. So it kind of threw off our statistics that we've got huge return rates, which is really exciting, and I think speaks volumes to volunteers wanting to be back and have that experience again.
Yeah, they say if you really want to learn something, try to teach it to somebody. And so, you have to be pretty confident in all the outdoor skills and the self-development.
Well, and our students are just really, really amazing people. And so getting to be out in the field, I think a lot of our volunteers sometimes come in to be like, I'm going to lead a group of kids on a backpacking trip, and actually come out very humbled because they learn so much from our students, just about the world and their perspectives and that kind of thing, that it's not just about like being out and like being good at setting up a tent, but I think our students are teaching our volunteers a lot just about how to exist in the world as better people.
Yeah. So here in Colorado, where are some places that you go on these trips? I know you operate all over the country, but just I will probably know some of the places in Colorado. Where are some places?
Yeah, so we operate under Forest Service permits. So in Colorado, we're down outside of Crested Butte, up on like Kebler Pass kind of area, OB Joyful Pass.
Oh man, it's so pretty.
Beautiful. Yeah. Then we're outside of Carbondale and Basalt in the Josephine Lake Savage Peak area. And then up outside of Meeker up in the Flat Tops in Colorado. And
Those
then we
are
hold
the best spots.
Yeah, and then we hold Forest Service permits up in Medicine Bow as well. So we're taking some kids up into Wyoming.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But
really
then
beautiful areas.
we're also like you said, connecting these major metro areas to these beautiful regional public spaces. Here in Colorado, Elizabeth touched on the highlights, but we're doing that in the 6 other cities that we're operating in as well.
Sure.
So with our Boston expeditions, we're visiting the White Mountains or the Presidential Range. In Minneapolis, we do 8-day Boundary Waters paddling expeditions. In the Bay Area, we're going to Yosemite National Park and the Ansel Adams Wilderness, the Olympic Peninsula, the Cascade Range, the Eagle Cap Wilderness of the Willowas in the Pacific Northwest. So wherever we go, we're connecting these youth to some really incredible, awe-inspiring landscapes.
Oh yeah, I mean everywhere you named, the Pacific Northwest is where I did Knowles, and that's where I got introduced to all this.
Yeah.
And it's just, gosh, the wildlife there is spectacular.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the public lands, and I know that you guys rely heavily on public lands, and there's been all this talk recently about disposing of some of the public land. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, just a couple. Yeah, but for sure. Just a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, I put a letter out via our e-news to our followers, just talking a little bit about that connection. I was lucky enough to get back to Washington, D.C. with the Outdoor Industry Association for their Capital Summit just a few weeks ago, where we got to, walk the hill with not only, nonprofit organization leaders like myself from around the country, but also the vice presidents, the CEOs, the directors of some of the outdoor industry's biggest and best known brands, to say that public lands are critically important, not only to our natural and cultural heritage, but to these businesses that I think the last report showed the outdoor industry is valued at $887 billion to the American economy and employs over 7 million people directly. So it's a huge economic engine to be able to recreate on this awesome outdoor recreation infrastructure that we have. And BCM obviously relies on it, critically. We would not be able to do what we do if we weren't able to take the kids into this, inspiring outdoor classroom and get them into a place and space that allows them to, disconnect from and think of ways to overcome some of the challenges that they might be facing back home.
Yeah. I think I got that email from you, and I'll figure out a way to link that on the webpage so people can read it, because I think that's super important and timely. To back it up a little bit, as we were saying before we started recording, I love getting the backgrounds on the people I interview, because everybody's got such interesting backgrounds and interesting reasons that they ended up in these cool careers. So where did you guys grow up, and how did you end up working
for Big City Mountaineers?
Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead and answer that question first?
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to grow up in Denver with a lot of time spent up in Estes Park. And so I was definitely one of the kids that my mom kicked me and my brother out into the woods behind our house and said, I'll ring the bell at lunchtime and I'll ring the bell at dinner time and you have to come home. So got to play outside a lot, but very locally. We weren't big campers, a lot of local hiking, but went on a backpacking trip my junior year of high school and just absolutely fell in love with this idea of backcountry travel and this idea that like this could be something I could do for a job. Like the guides on that trip were just so cool, and I wanted to be that. And so as I was going through college, ended up guiding. So guiding backpacking and climbing programs at a local camp just up in Bailey, Colorado.
Okay.
Kind of went through that. Got a little bit burned out though on the program side. So started nannying and then traveled extensively, taught English in India, kind of the Nepal region of India for a while, and then came back and thought I wanted to get into grant writing. So actually started Big City Mountaineers as a marketing and development intern, but then realized I didn't really like raising money. And
that's what my wife does, man. It's rough.
Yeah.
She's
really
good at it. It's tough.
But yeah, so I missed the programming side and got kind of fortunate the program manager quit right before the summer, and so stepped into the Colorado program manager role. Ran our programs here for 5 years, and then here in Colorado, and then have been the national program director for the last 3 summers.
That's great.
But I mean, just avidly outdoors myself, and really love introducing people to the outdoors, teaching friends in the outdoors. It's really where I spend all of my time when I'm not at the office. So
perfect.
Yeah.
And Bryan, I know a lot of your background.
Yeah, well, I think if you had to kind of trace the origin back to what got me connected to the outdoors so much, it would definitely be my grandparents on my mom's side. Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of time with them growing up. Summers at their 10-acre property in northeastern Pennsylvania, coal country, Mount Carmel region. But a little bit like Elizabeth, just kind of tromped around in that neck of the woods for years and years with my brother, getting lost into some of those hills and cliffs, and was always really impressed with both my grandma and grandpa's road trips, even into their 60s and 70s. Would hop in the car and drive to California and back, and then show me pictures of where they went and what they visited. And when you're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old and you're seeing pictures of giant sequoias in the Grand Canyon and, Rocky Mountain National Park, and you're like, wow, my grandparents went and did that, I want to go check that out too,
I still feel that way. I'm almost 40.
Right.
Whenever I see those pictures.
So they were real inspirations for me to, kind of cast my lot in the West. And after graduating from Penn State and doing a little bit of work for the Nature Conservancy in Washington, D.C., settled in Colorado in 2001, and have been fortunate enough to stay in the conservation and recreation advocacy space for that entire time, and am just really, really proud and honored to have developed as a nonprofit professional to the point where I can be an executive director and lead an organization as great as Big City Mountaineers.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned being fortunate and lucky, and I'll just say this for people who don't know you: you make your own luck, because you're one of the hardest working people I know. That's the thing that has always hit me from the first time I met you, is you have always been laser focused, and you're very good at what you do, and you get it done, but get it done in a very non-pushy way. Yet you're able to. It's pretty amazing. It's been amazing to watch you work.
Thanks.
So it's no surprise that you're here.
Well, thanks. That's nice of you to say.
Yeah.
I've just always been, kind of committed to these causes, and really never had like a fork in the road moment where I was gonna, do something different.
Mm-hmm.
Always wanted to work on behalf of, public lands, conservation of landscapes, and connecting people to those places, because I know what it meant to me growing up, and how important I think it is for all of us to have those experiences.
Mm-hmm. So Bryan, from in your 2 years here at Big City Mountaineers, what's been the biggest surprise about the organization? If there's been one, when you started the job, I'm sure you had your ideas about how it was going to go. And I'm sure there have been a million surprises. It's probably a lot different in great ways from what you expected. Is there a certain surprise that sticks out in your mind?
Well, for me, I think the one thing that has really surprised me has been, how enthusiastic the volunteer base is for our work. I mean, once you kind of go out on one of these expeditions and experience it firsthand, we have fans for life. And so keeping that excitement bottled a little bit has been a little bit of a challenge, because we have folks who have connected to BCM now over the 27-year history of the organization, living in all these places all over the country. Yeah. And so they call and say, hey, we want to start a BCM here and here and here and here. And I want to say yes to all of those phone calls, but you also have to be, a really thoughtful and pragmatic, leader that doesn't spread the organization out too thin or put us in a place where we would have to retreat or pull out of after a season or two. And so to me, it's been that balancing act of getting people really fired up and excited about our mission and our work and encouraging that, but also staying disciplined and focused on the cities that we're operating in and really growing our roots in those cities, much, much more significantly, so that, if and when the opportunity really strikes to grow and move into a new place, we've got this incredible foundation in the other cities that can help us succeed in the new.
So, are there any overarching lessons this is a question for both of you that you've taken from living a life and having a career centered around the outdoors, education, service? When you step back and look, is there anything you guys know that somebody, say, who has worked at a bank their whole life doesn't know? Any just lessons about life and the importance of being outdoors, anything like that? Anything come to mind?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is how important people are. Back to your very first question about this idea of teamwork in the outdoors, and I think working in the outdoor industry, working in the nonprofit industry, and then just personally, being active in the outdoors, that it's really more about the people that you're out there with and the people you're working beside, and the people that you're hiking or climbing with, and your belay partners and your mountain bike partners and your expedition partners, and that I think that's what makes just life more vibrant, is the people that you're spending time with.
I think that's a good one. Any from you?
Well, maybe just to build on that, I think for me, it is whether you're working in the for-profit space or the not-for-profit space, whether you're out on a week-long expedition or you're just kind of living an urban lifestyle. It is those relationships that you build over time that not only provide you with that next opportunity, but also the support for the project or the initiative that you're currently working in. So I think one thing that I try to do at BCM and really in life in general is to really foster as many really strong personal relationships as I possibly can, because you never know when those relationships are going to come back around and be incredibly valuable, or you're really going to need to lean on them.
Yep.
So I think that is one thing that a life outdoors has allowed me to maybe reflect on a little bit more, is just how important personal relationships are to you and your success.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And I think that there's something about the outdoors and hard physical challenges that strips away a lot of the nonsense that goes along with day-to-day life.
Sure.
And I think that's why you can get to be so close with people. You go on a week-long trip with somebody, if it's hard and challenging, you're better friends with that person than you are with a lot of people you've known for years.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, there's a reason why all these banks and corporations go on these team building retreats where they climb up ropes courses and stuff, because it really is. It strips that stuff away and it brings you together. At least that's my opinion.
Well, and I think that it's concrete too. Like you've got an accomplishment, at the end of the day, or a very specific, lesson learned, maybe at the end of the day. If you didn't get to the top of that mountain, you took something away from that experience. There was a real reason that's going to stick in your mind for the rest of your life why you didn't get to the top of that mountain. Or if you did accomplish that summit, you've checked a box, and that is something that you can say you've done. Whereas I think so many people's lives, so many jobs out there, kind of go on, and kind of they're always in this kind of state of flux or ambiguity, and there's real solid kind of concrete goals that are either accomplished or not accomplished in the outdoors. And I think that is something that resonates with a lot of people when they come back from a trip.
Yeah, that's very well put. I agree with all that. You were talking about summits, and I wanted to ask you about your Summit for Someone program. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Sure. Well, it's really our biggest fundraiser for the organization. It's a series of charity climbs. We put on 12 to 15 scheduled climbs of not only North America, but select international peaks. Things like, or places like the Grand Teton, Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, Mount Whitney. We've gone to Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
Elizabeth actually climbed Pico de Orizaba, the highest point in Mexico, for us earlier this spring.
How was that?
With a team of women.
It was awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really great.
What is that, like 19,000?
18.4,
Wow.
just over.
Yeah, that's the real deal.
Yeah.
And so we have taken, for lack of a better example, the Race for the Cure model, where you as a runner or racer can raise money for your charity through a 5K or 10K. We apply that to mountaineering. So we accept participants who, through reaching a fundraising goal, we will then put on a guided climb of that peak. It's a great win-win for BCM and for the climber or participant. Obviously, we're raising critical funds for the organization to run our programming year in and year out. And then the climber or the fundraiser gets that free guided climb up that peak that they might not be able to do on their own, they might not feel comfortable doing on their own, or has always been kind of one of those bucket list items for them that now they get to tick off.
That's great. I'll put a link to that because there's some pretty impressive mountains on there that you guys are connected with.
Yeah, well, and I would just maybe kind of throw out another plug. You just touched on how so many companies are looking to do climbs and rope courses and team building events, out there across the country. We can provide custom, tailored corporate climbs for partners that are looking to provide those team building opportunities for their employees, while at the same time folding in a philanthropic component to BCM. So,
I didn't realize that.
That's definitely something that we're digging into more these days. Is seeing more interest from more companies who want to kind of blend those two things and partner up with BCM to make happen.
I think the thing that's really neat about the Summit for Someone program too, like Bryan was saying, is that you're raising money and you're getting to do this bucket list item, but standing on top of whatever that peak is, so be it the Grand Teton or Mount Rainier's, that you made it possible for a Big City Mountaineers student then to stand on top of a much smaller peak, be it Medicine Bow Peak or Big Marvin Peak or an unnamed peak. But we really try to associate those challenge days into our programs, and so you doing this big thing that feels like a big deal for you is making it possible for a really big deal thing to happen for a student. And I think that's really like what brings the magic to the Summit for Someone program. Is it's not just about climbing a mountain, it's not just checking a box, but it's using that box to make it possible for a kid to do something that they never would have been able to do otherwise.
Do you have an example? I'm sure you've got probably hundreds, but example of a success story that sticks out into your mind when you think about this certain kid? You think that's what it's all about. When I started doing this is what I dreamed of. Is there any one? You obviously don't have to say names, but is there one that sticks out that you could share?
I've got a laundry list of them.
I bet you.
My most recent, there's actually 2 girls from my expedition this summer, but Isa especially was a young woman, 16 years old, absolutely terrified. So we got in the van, she was so quiet, it wasn't that she was shy or uncomfortable, she just really, I think was very thoughtful about what we were about to do. And so, we talked a little bit in the van right out there. First night was fine, she did a pretty good job. But about 15 minutes into the first day with our backpacks on, I was hiking at the back and we stopped for water, and she turned around and walked over and just tears in her eyes. And I've told a lot of kids that they could do, you can do this, and really done a lot of motivating, but she's like, I can't do this, and was really one of the first kids that I believed. Usually I'll make them try a little longer, but I turned her around, took the brain of her backpack on, threw it onto mine just to drop as much weight as I could from her pack, because the look in her eye said to me she was not going to. Yeah, she was serious. This is not going to happen. And so our first day, it was a lot of lows, but a couple highs. We came around first we were in this awful rainstorm. So first day on the trail, terrible rain. We come around this corner to more raspberries than I've seen in the wild in my entire career in the outdoors. Just thousands. We were filling Nalgene's full of raspberries for breakfast the next morning, and just brought the day up. But then kind of tanked again. She was having a really hard time. First night out, thunder and lightning storm. Pretty scary for kids. First night we were safe, but it's scary. It's scary. Yeah. Second day, huge uphill hike, and similarly, it was step by step with her. Just one more step. We're gonna do this. We got to our summit day, and similarly, one step at a time. We kind of had this tripod where she had her hand on my hand on top of a trekking pole, and then we both had trekking poles, and so kind of 3-legged walk to get to our summit. And we got to the top, and she was just in completely different tears, tears of joy, so excited, just absolutely life-changing. And then we got to our last day, and she was our navigator, so was supposed to lead us out. And as adults, that day were you all are in charge. We leave when you say we leave. We follow you. They'd made this elaborate plan. We woke up at 5 a.m. to do a 4-mile day, but the way they'd done the math, it was going to take us 8 hours to get to our last campsite. And Isa was running down the trail. This kid who had been absolutely terrified, who could barely deal with scree. We're on this narrow stretch. I was ready to go up and help her. Narrow stretch of trail, she just pounded right through. We ended up making it to our campsite before lunch. They were all so proud of themselves. But more so, after the expedition, I've been able to keep in touch with Isa, and we've stayed in touch with that agency, and she's now done 3 public speaking events for us, something that all of her agency staff were she never would have talked in front of a group. But after this experience of really overcoming something she didn't think she could do, she's now doing all these things she didn't think she could do. So it's been pretty neat to see. I'm really hopeful she's going to come back on my expedition this summer as a peer leader.
That's great.
So she's one of my favorites. And then from that same trip, a young woman named Luce, a little bit older, is actually coming to work for us this summer. Will be a staff person up at our overnight camp. And similarly, on our summit day, she kind of jogged by me and was I love this! I'm in the mountains! And it's really captured kind of the direction of her life. So.
And that's just 2 that you've. It's happening all over the country.
That was just last summer.
Every week.
Yeah.
In the summer. That's great. That's a great story, and I wish people could see your face when you're telling it, because you could see the enthusiasm. I know we're bumping on time, and you guys have a lot more important stuff to do than keep listening to me. So I've got a few quick questions that I've asked pretty much everybody I've interviewed, and it's good to kind of compare and contrast the answers. Are there any books that you guys have read or that you recommend to others that have been very influential in your work or life, or just books that have meant a lot to you?
Well, none that kind of stand out to me right this very second, but maybe to just kind of put a plug in for BCM one more time. One of the individuals that was really instrumental in the formation of Big City Mountaineers back in the mid-'90s was the founder of JanSport, a guy by the name of Skip Yowell. And Skip wrote a memoir called The Hippie Guide to Climbing the Corporate Ladder.
I've read it.
And
it's awesome.
That's one that we have multiple copies of here at Big City Mountaineers and share with new staff and with board members, because Skip has a legacy within BCM, but also within the outdoor industry, and that's a real fun read.
That's a great book. I'd forgotten about that. I have it on my shelf. I read it so long ago. But yeah, that's a great one, and nobody's recommended that yet. Sometimes there's repeats on these things. That's a really good. I'll have links to this on the website. Annie, for you?
I think when we're talking about the work that we're doing specifically, there's a great book called Forever Changed, and I can't remember the name of the woman who wrote it. She was the founder of Summer Search.
Okay.
And so it's all about her experience getting young adults from the inner cities out to summer camps, and just absolutely how powerful it was. And I just remember reading it and being like every chapter being like, yes, she gets it, because she also started some of this model of getting students who wouldn't have the opportunity to go out on these experiences. So that one's phenomenal.
That's a good one. I haven't heard of that either.
Yeah, it's great. Just kind of about why getting kids out to kind of summer camps. They're definitely more traditional summer camps, but can be really transformational. And then Summer Search, just a really interesting organization. But I've got a couple of favorite just American West ones, because that was the question you put down. Yeah. The Emerald Mile, Kevin Federko.
I read that last year. That's one of the best I've read.
Just absolutely amazing.
Have you read that?
No.
You'd love it.
It's so good.
It hits on, it's an adventure, and it hits on water rights, it hits on water in the West, it hits on conservation in the West, history of the West. That was an amazing book.
It's about, I can try to remember, I've got a copy of it. When the Glen Canyon Dam almost failed in 1980, the mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s, yeah.
And using that, so talking about, damming in the West, but then about these gentlemen who still hold the speed record for the Grand Canyon, because it was at flood and was really the closest to the Grand Canyon since it was dammed to run at a natural level. And so these guys in a wooden dory hold the speed record for it.
It's a great book.
It's great. And Peter Heller's The Dog Stars, just about Colorado fiction.
I gave it to my dad for his birthday.
It's so great.
Never read it.
It's so good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I never read fiction, but I need to read more. So.
Well, and if you're into the Grand Canyon, have you watched The Time Travelers? It just came out. It's a short video that Chaco put on about the gentleman who tried to break the speed record this year for the Grand Canyon.
No.
It's a bunch of guys who live up in Carbondale.
Oh, really?
And it's about them trying to take on the speed record.
Okay, I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, it's great. You should watch it personally.
I will. Yeah, no, I will. I research all this. That's one of the reasons I do these interviews, is because everybody's got all these cool books and all this interesting knowledge. And if nobody else listens, at least I'll learn something. So that leads me into my next question. Any films or documentaries that have been meaningful for you guys?
I've got a bunch of shorts that I love. Yeah. On the conservation side, pay attention. I just was at the 5 Point Film Festival.
Oh, were you?
So I don't think this one's out yet, but there's a new documentary about the gentleman who founded the North Face. Tompkins and I had no idea. He's basically saved the vast majority of South America and turned it into national parks. But very well done.
Yep. He's an interesting guy, or was an interesting guy. Now his wife is continuing that work.
Yeah,
I think
amazing.
They just donated a huge chunk to the government down there. That's really cool. That's a beautiful part of the world. What is the most powerful experience you've ever had in the outdoors? And that could be funny, scary, just kind of cool. Is there any experience that sticks out? I used to ask what's the craziest thing that ever happened, and I like that one. But maybe there's something that wasn't crazy. But is there a crazy one?
How long of a story do you want?
However long you want.
One that comes to mind for me is my very first overnight trip as an instructor. So I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
Never been out in the field with kids before, done some backpacking, and we were up by Square Top Lakes, which is just up across from, underneath Square Top, right across from Bierstadt and Evans.
Okay, yeah.
Just a quick overnighter, but we'd settled in, first time camping for a lot of these students, and I sat down to do bedtime stories. I brought a couple books, and we're drinking hot chocolate, and start hearing thunder, but, don't pay a ton of attention. I'm with another new instructor. It's just an overnight, so our boss was like, "You'll be fine."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we were lightning all along the ridgeline right above us, flashbang. So we're getting everybody out in lightning position, because this is how we've been trained. Everybody on lightning position. So they're all out, but everybody's getting soaked, and it's dark and it's scary. And so we're like, okay, everybody back in your tents. And then I don't remember who, I'm not going to claim responsibility, but somebody had the bright idea to pull out the center tent pole from all of our, pyramid tents, so that, we take the metal out. When you take a pole out of a tent, it's no longer waterproof because it needs that tautness. And so storm passes, but suffice it to say, we now have a field full of soaking wet kids, soaking wet adults. I get everybody tucked away. At some point, though, give away my sleeping bag. And I remember saying to my co-instructor, I don't have my sleeping bag, but I've got some extra clothes. I'm sure I'll be fine. So we all go to bed. The coldest night of my entire life. We're 12,000 feet. I was totally wet.
Yeah.
The two girls I was sharing the tent with both just went to either side of the tent. So there's no spooning. At one point, I just tried to wrap myself in my sleeping pad, get up at 5:30 in the morning just to start walking laps around camp because I was so cold.
Sure.
Go to knock on the boys' tent to kind of see, what's up for the day. And still, this was almost 20 years ago, but they all sit up, all four of them, just cocooned in their sleeping bags. In my memory, there's steam coming off. It's so warm inside this tent. And they're how'd you sleep? I was I didn't sleep. I didn't have a sleeping bag. I was so cold. And all of their faces just drop. They're we ended up with an extra sleeping bag in here. We used it to sop up the water in the bottom of our tent. So I learned a lot. My very first trip. So many lessons from that trip. But that's probably one that sticks out.
Do you have one, Bryan? Any that comes out?
Well, there's a few. I nothing. I definitely have my share of lightning storms and rainstorms. One that comes to mind is, pulling out our rain fly as quickly as we possibly can while we're, up at the boulder field on Long's Peak as a, massive, hail and thunderstorm comes, right over the diamond, and you had minutes to react. And that one was definitely going to stick in my mind for a long, long time. But I think, one of the outdoor experiences that I really enjoyed and really, I think, kind of for me, solidified my career in conservation and recreation was being able to work on the Continental Divide Trail. Mm-hmm. And so, when I was the field operations manager for the Continental Divide Trail Alliance, I got to, literally dot lines on, topo maps and, see how that would connect to other sections of the CDT. And so, I got to spend a lot of time dotting those lines on maps and then going out and kind of field testing them. Mm-hmm. And so tromped around on a lot of, on a lot of cross-country travel, but saw some, really incredible landscapes from Canada to Mexico. Wow. And now, looking back on some of those trips, now 10, 12, 14 years ago now, some of those sections are now newly constructed 100-plus mile segments of the CDT that people are hiking on and enjoying. So I love to be able to kind of think back onto those times and figuring out ways to kind of connect, points on a map and then work with, the Forest Service or the BLM or the Park Service to kind of connect those dots with actual trail, constructed on the ground now.
Very cool. Next to the last question, if the people that listen to this podcast love the American West in one way or the other, whether it's through recreation or through ranching or through conservation, through art. I've interviewed some artists. If you could make a request of the people listening to this or give them some advice, just something that you think is important, what request would you make to the people listening to this podcast?
Well, for me, I'd say take a kid outside.
Yeah, that's
I have 2 boys that I try to get out a lot with, and I've already seen in just their young life how quickly and easily they've connected to the outdoors and connected to nature, and now have my sensibilities and love for the outdoors instilled in them. And so it doesn't take a lot, but it's definitely an important thing to do, I think, for every kid. And if you're a parent, or if you're a mentor, or you're an aunt or an uncle, or even a volunteer with Big City Mountaineers, getting a kid outdoors is really, really important.
Elizabeth?
Brian stole mine. Like, that was totally what
I think that's very important.
But I think, another thing that I've applied personally in my life is, especially talking to a bunch of people who love being in the outdoors, is go try something new outside. I think it's easy to get stuck into I just hike. Like, go be a beginner for a little while, and I think that ties into then taking people out, because I think as then you're taking people to enjoy the thing you love, you can pull on those experiences. Because I think for some of us who've been doing this for 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, it's easy to forget what it was like that very first time that you went out. And so go find a way that you can kind of put yourself back in that very first time shoes. And then bring somebody, bring somebody with you.
So how can people connect with Big City Mountaineers?
So they can obviously visit our website, bigcitymountaineers.org.
Yep.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And if you do visit our website, be sure to sign up for our e-newsletter. It should be fairly easy to find right there on the homepage.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.